My name is Christian Ashley, a seminary student and servant of God, and you are listening to the Let Nothing Move You podcast, a proud Anazal Ministries podcast.
Welcome back, everyone, to the next episode of the Let Nothing Move You podcast. Your host, Christian Ashley, as we continue on through the book of Deuteronomy. So if I sound a little off today real quick, that is because I'm not in my usual recording environment. And in fact, I will never be in that room again. Because I am officially graduated. I am done with seminary. I'm never going back. No doctoral work for this guy. I have fully mastered divinity itself. I've reused that joke multiple times over. Most people laugh. I'm feeling pretty good. So I am in an Airbnb right now that my mom got, where family is at as we're celebrating this time together. So if I sound a little off, if there's too much in the background, if my voice isn't as loud as normal, that's probably why. Because I'm having to hold my microphone. There's not exactly, shall we say, an ideal recording setup in this house. Lots of open concepts or whatever around here that would really ruin the audio. So working with what I've got. But I can't focus on the negative as much as I like to accentuate the negative. This is a good time. I'm really happy. I'm really joyful. It was a lot of hard work I put into there. Got to be in a crowd of some really great people that are also getting the same thing I'm getting, that are going to go out there and bring good to the church and to the world. I'm very hopeful for the future. Now, that does come with a caveat. I don't know where I'm going to be, so I am coming back home for a little bit to send out resumes and figure out where to go from there. There's some promising prospects that would be a lot better than some of the ones I had before. Certainly pay a lot better at the very least. So we'll see. I don't know where I'll end up. I could be as far as Oregon and Utah. I could be in North Carolina again. I could be in New York. I don't know. So I'm having to put my trust and faith in that. So we'll see how things develop from there. But today, as far as we're concerned, we're going to be in Deuteronomy 15 through 17 with another caveat there of, because it was graduation week and because I was getting stuff out of my room, I haven't had time to write notes. So it may be one of those episodes. So thanks for sticking with me. We're going to get through this together. We're going to be in chapter 15 today, starting off with verses 1 through 23. At the end of every 7 years, you shall grant a release, and this is the manner of the release. Every creditor shall release what he has lent to his neighbor. He shall not exact it of his neighbor, his brother, because the Lord's release has been proclaimed. Of a foreigner you may exact it, but whatever of yours is with your brother, your hand shall release. But there will be no poor among you, for the Lord will bless you in the land that the Lord your God is giving you for an inheritance to possess, if only you will strictly obey the voice of the Lord your God, being careful to do all his commandment that I command you today. For the Lord your God will bless you as he promised you, and you shall lend to many nations, but you shall not borrow, and you shall rule over many nations, but they shall not rule over you. If among you one of your brothers should become poor in any of your towns within your land that the Lord your God is giving you, you shall not harden your heart or shut your hand against your poor brother, but you shall open your hand to him and lend him sufficient for his need, whatever it may be. Take care lest there be an unworthy thought in your heart, and you say, the 7th year, the year of release is near, and your eye look grudgingly on your poor brother, and you give him nothing. And he cried to the Lord against you, and you be guilty of sin. You shall give to him freely, and your heart shall not be grudging when you give to him, because for this the Lord your God will bless you in all your work and in all that you undertake. For there will never cease to be poor in the land. Therefore I command you, you shall open wide your hand to your brother, to the needy and to the poor in your land. If your brother, a Hebrew man or a Hebrew woman, is sold to you, he shall serve you 6 years, and in the 7th year you shall let him go free from you. And when you let him go free from you, you shall not let him go empty-handed. You shall furnish him liberally out of your flock, out of your threshing floor, and out of your winepress. As the Lord your God has blessed you, you shall give to him. You shall remember that you were a slave in the land of Egypt, and the Lord your God redeemed you. Therefore I command you this today. But if he says to you, I will not go out from you, because he loves you in your household, since he is well off with you, you shall take an awl and put it through his ear into the door, and he shall be your slave forever. And to your female slaves you shall do the same. It shall not seem hard to you when you let him go free from you, for at half the cost of a hired worker he has served you 6 years. So the Lord your God will bless you in all that you do. All the firstborn males that are born of your herd and flock you shall dedicate to the Lord your God. You shall do no work with the firstborn of your herd, nor shear the firstborn of your flock. You shall eat it, you and your household, before the Lord your God, year by year, at the place that the Lord will choose. But if it has any blemish, if it is lame or blind, or has any serious blemish whatever, you shall not sacrifice it to the Lord your God. You shall eat it within your towns. The unclean and the clean alike may eat it, as though it were a gazelle or a deer. Only you shall not eat its blood. You shall pour it out on the ground like water. So what we have here is further instruction on rules that have already been given. This part of the process of Deuteronomy is bringing up stuff from the past, but then adding addendums to it and making sure that people understand what they're supposed to be doing. And for this one specifically, it's about freeing people from slavery, freeing them from being poor, freeing them from loss in many respects. And God is purposely talking to the people of Israel saying, look, the ideal here is that there be no poor in the land. Because guess what? At the very start of Israel, there is no such thing as a poor person. Everyone is going to be allotted land according to their needs, according to the size of their family, according to which tribe that they are in. So everyone, well, not starting off as wealthy as the guy next to him maybe, will not be poor. So at the very start of Israel's history, there was not going to be a single poor person among them. However, God, knowing his people as he did, says, while there will be no poor people among them at that time in history, there will be people who will be poor later on. There will never cease to be poor in the land, because God knows Israel isn't going to be always following the law. They're not always going to be listening to him. So when they don't listen to him, he doesn't bless them like he promises that he'll do when they listen to him, which means that the blessing says you'll never suffer loss as far as financial gain. Your crops will always be there for you. Your animals will always be fed and ready to be served. That doesn't apply because they're not listening to him. So therefore, some people, as a result of the punishment, can end up poor. And that means they need to be looked after because they've lost everything. They have to sell their land to someone else. But it's not supposed to remain that way. Even if an Israelite is selling themselves into slavery at the year of Jubilee, after their time is up as well, they are supposed to be given wealth back. Because, as God points out here, you benefited from their labor for free. Yeah, you fed them. Yeah, you gave them a place to stay, but you didn't pay them. That isn't a wage. That's just a place to stay. That's why, and I will rant here a little bit, so many of the churches I've said no to have kind of said, oh, well, here's your salary. And also, well, there's a parish house here, but we're going to take, $20,000, $30,000 out of your salary, which means that really you're only getting like 10 or 15, which once again, I'm not about the money, but I'm not financially stupid either. You need to have that money to buy all things, to pay debts, for medical expenses. And yes, it would be great to start off with a house at the very beginning, but I don't need a house, especially if you're going to screw me over like that and take that much out of my salary. Even though, yeah, house, great. I can live in an apartment and be frugal and be perfectly fine. I don't need to start with that. That doesn't mean that you can treat someone poorly simply because they're doing you a service, simply because they are literally your slave in this instance. It's like, no, treat them well. And then when their time is up, don't make a big deal out of it. Give them an abundance because you have been richly rewarded for serving them well as they served you well. So once again, if anyone ever tells you Bible slavery bad, yeah, slavery is bad, but also look at the context here. Look at how they were supposed to treat their slaves. Not a single country in history has ever replicated this, and Israel barely did. But this was part of the law. The very fabric of their society was built around this. Even if you have slaves because you people are hard of heart, and that's why I'm going to allow you to divorce, that's why I'm going to allow you to do these things, you still need to treat them well. And if you don't, it's going to be on you. And we also see here a bit on how, they can lend to other nations, but they cannot borrow from other nations because God doesn't want them to be under the crediting of another nation who would then rule over them in that regard. Now, this is specifically economic policy for the Israelite people, for the Jewish people. But we can still learn from it. It's a good thing not to have a debt over your head as a nation or as a church or as individuals when it comes to a bank, when it comes to a loan office, when it comes to a family member or friend or someone who has that hold over us now that we are in that situation. Now, sometimes it's going to be what you have to do. Like, I had to take out loans in order to get my second year paid. The other 2 years I was in school, Mom very graciously gave me the money to get that done. She didn't have to do it. I am indebted to her, even if she never expects me to pay it back. But it's still a debt in a sense. And it's a good one to have, someone that gave lovingly and freely of that money, of my grandparents' money that was gifted to her through a will, I get to reap the benefits from. But there's still that, $10,000, $11,000 that I have to pay off to the bank. So that's something I need to be thinking of when I'm thinking about churches. Am I going to be able to pay off my debts? And if they're not going to be able to pay me what I need, it's not a wise decision to go with them. Unless God says otherwise, then the wisdom would be not me listening to God. If he wants me to go to one of those places I mentioned earlier where it wouldn't be treating me well, I wouldn't understand it, but I'd still have to submit to it. That's not my ideal. That is not what I want to do, but it's what I would need to do if he said to do that. And none of those places I mentioned earlier, did he say, that's exactly where I want you, even though they're going to treat you like this, treat you terribly. So I'm very happy for that. That may change. We shall see. But for them, they could not be held in the debt of another nation because those nations did not love Jesus. Now, they could do it for those other nations. Why? Because they were supposed to treat those nations better than those nations would treat them. This was a show of good faith. This was a show of the outpouring of love from God, that yes, we are God's chosen people, but you are also descended from Adam like we are. And we also have a responsibility to love and protect you. And this is one way we could do that, because if you did it with Israel, as opposed to, say, Assyria or Babylon or Phoenicia or who have you, they're going to charge you exorbitant interest rates. We're not allowed to do that. So what we gift you, that's what we expect you to pay back. And it was the ideal there to be good to those people, even when they weren't being good to Israel. And the last part of this one right here, the firstborn males, that's been brought up multiple times, all the way back in Exodus, of them being dedicated to God. These are the ones that they're supposed to give to God as part of the sacrificial system, as part of dependence on him, of saying, well, it's the firstborn, it's the most important. Yes, that's exactly why that one has to die, because, and we're going to see a little bit of typology in a bit, in specifically 17, if I remember correctly, it's also supposed to be a mark of the coming of Jesus Christ as the firstborn, as the only begotten Son of God, as the most important, the only one free from sin and blemish, that the people could be saved, not just the Jewish people, but the entire world. And so God sets things up. Once again, I'm not one of those people who sees Jesus under every rock and in every verse in Scripture. I still think he's the one who breathed and inspired it, sure, but I'm not looking at the court musicians in David's kingdom and going, yep, there's Jesus, the typology is just everywhere, and all these random proper nouns I'm supposed to be saying. Like, no. But when I do see it, I'm going to call it out for what it is, because that's something we do need to focus on. And we'll go from there to chapter 16. This time, we are going to be in verses 1 through 8. Observe the month of Abib and keep the Passover to the Lord your God, for in the month of Abib the Lord your God brought you out of Egypt by night. And you shall offer the Passover sacrifice to the Lord your God from the flock or the herd at the place that the Lord will choose to make his name dwell there. You shall eat no leavened bread with it. 7 days you shall eat it with unleavened bread, the bread of affliction. For you came out of the land of Egypt in haste, that all the days of your life you may remember the day when you came out of the land of Egypt. No leaven shall be seen with you in all your territory for 7 days. Nor shall any of the flesh that you sacrifice on the evening of the first day remain all night until morning. You may not offer the Passover sacrifice within any of your towns that the Lord your God is giving you, but at the place that the Lord your God will choose to make his name dwell in it. There you shall offer the Passover sacrifice in the evening at sunset at the time you came out of Egypt. And you shall cook it and eat it at the place the Lord your God will choose. And in the morning you shall turn and go to your tents. For 6 days you shall eat unleavened bread, and on the seventh day there shall be a solemn assembly to the Lord your God. You shall do no work on it. So we get some more on Passover here that's been covered multiple times over in the Pentateuch because it's important. When the Bible repeats itself, there's something important to be said there. And specifically for the Jewish people first, they needed to have this celebration because it is the only reason God bringing them out of Egypt that they can be doing what they're doing right now. If they don't celebrate this, they don't celebrate God. They don't celebrate what he did for their ancestors. It shows they don't love him. And yeah, well, it didn't happen to me. Doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. It happened to ancestors. It happened to people who had to suffer through slavery in Egypt for 400 some years. And you get to reap the benefits of their hard labor because it should be easier for the next generation compared to the ones that came before. So all God is asking is just celebrate. Just remember what I did for your ancestors so that you can keep in mind, oh, well, if he did that for them, what could he do for me? What could he do for us? A lot of things. But it's only if they keep their minds right. And we're going to see over the years, like prophets decrying people, they'll celebrate this, but they don't understand why, or they refuse to understand why. And it's like, you're doing it for no purpose at all then. If you're just celebrating it, you're just having a holiday for the sake of having a holiday. No, these holidays have purposes. They are there to build you up. They're there to remind you of who I am as God. So then come and follow me instead, me alone. Leave everything else aside. So you go, man, oh, I'm not a slave in Egypt. So yeah, I'll eat some unleavened bread for a couple of days, for an entire week, and I'm going to do no work on the Sabbath. And I'm going to remember what God did for the people who came before me. He said that I know he can do the same for me if anything were to happen. And it's precisely because they don't do this, and even in the days of Jesus, that they celebrate, but they don't understand the heart behind why, that God gets upset with them. So for us, looking back on this, yeah, we don't need to celebrate Passover. I mean, I have no Jewish ancestry that I know of, and if I did, that'd be cool, but it wouldn't change anything about me. What does change me is that during the week of Passover, those events were kind of lived over again through sacrifice on the cross. And so we have Easter. Now, Easter's come and gone at this point in time. I'm not a dates guy, so I never really look at that. When I do actually get into potentially a head past world, that's something I'm going to have people around me to remind me, hey, you can't do this on Christmas, the week of Christmas. We need to kind of have a Christmas service. If you're in the middle of, I don't know, like Job, it's like probably not the best time to be doing that. It's like, oh, okay, you know what, that makes sense. I just didn't think about it. Like, no, you have to think about these things. Thinking about what Easter is to us is what Passover is to them. Passover is for one nation being delivered by God. Easter is for the entire world being delivered by God if they just accept that free gift that he offers them, that many will refuse, but some will say yes to. And those of us who have said yes to that, we need to celebrate. So yeah, Easter's several months away from now, like 11 or so months. But at that same time, we need to think of the same things of, why is it important that we celebrate Easter? Oh, it's because I was saved from who I used to be. Jesus chose to die in my place for all of this so that I could live life and live it abundantly, which he didn't have to do, by the way. He could have just wiped his hands and said, all right, beginning with someone else, and we could have had an entirely new race of creatures out there that look nothing like humans, and God could have remade a new heaven and a new earth. But he didn't. He chose to stick by us. And if we lose sight of that, we lose sight of a lot of who God is. God is a God who loves. God is a God who does not give up on people until it comes to the point of no return. It doesn't mean he stops loving them. It means that they had the chance and they spat in his face. And so when we spit in his face, despite being given such a great gift that, yeah, I'm still eternally secure, I can't lose my salvation, it shows that my heart isn't in the right place, though. And I'm the one who needs to make an adjustment, not him. So when we're looking at all these festivals and celebrations, we're supposed to go, yeah, I need to be thinking about that. I need to be realizing what I need to do for him. And we can pick up that more in the next two festivals and feasts as we go through verses 9 through 17. You shall count 7 weeks. Begin to count to 7 weeks from the time the sickle is first to put to the standing grain. Then you shall keep the feast of weeks to the Lord your God with the tribute of a freewill offering from your hand, which you shall give as the Lord your God blesses you. You shall rejoice before the Lord your God, you and your son and your daughter, your male servant and your female servant, the Levite who is within your towns, the sojourner, the fatherless, and the widow who are among you, at the place that the Lord your God will choose to make his name dwell there. You shall remember that you were a slave in Egypt, and you shall be careful to observe these statutes. You shall keep the feast of booths 7 days when you have gathered in the produce from your threshing floor and your winepress. You shall rejoice in your feast, you and your son and your daughter, your male servant and your female servant, the Levite, the sojourner, the fatherless, and the widow who are within your towns. For 7 days you shall keep the feast of the Lord your God at the place that the Lord will choose, because the Lord your God will bless you in all your produce and all the works of your hands, so you will be altogether joyful. 3 times a year all your males shall appear before the Lord your God at the place that he will choose, at the feast of unleavened bread, at the feast of weeks, and at the feast of booths. They shall not appear before the Lord empty-handed. Every man shall give as he is able, according to the blessing your God that he has given you. And that's the other important part of all this, is that these are not solo celebrations. This is not time where they just, well, you know what? That Passover thing's pretty cool. I'm very grateful, God. Thank you very much for what you've done. And you keep your joy to yourself. I say this as someone who is incredibly introverted, someone who needs to work a lot on himself at times when it comes to this. One of my nicknames at seminary was they called me a hermit, and there's a reason for that, because I didn't go out too much. And some of that was I needed to get away from people. Some of that was me denying what I should have been doing and hanging out, get to know people better. Not to say I never hung out with people, not to say I never got to know people deeper. It could have been better, is what I would put on my progress report there. But for the people of Israel, these specific things, go out and celebrate, not just you and your family, not just you and the servants that you have in your household, not just the Levite who's been teaching you the law, but even with the sojourner in the land, the fatherless, and the widow. Everyone come together. Those sojourners are Gentiles. They don't know who God is, but they're in the land, so show them who he is. And maybe, just maybe, seeing you celebrate who God is will make them go, this is different from what I know. This is different from what I expect. We have festivals and celebrations and holidays when I'm worshiping Baal, or I'm worshiping Zeus, or I'm worshiping Nimrod, or not Nimrod. That was a person. Forgetting my Assyrian and Babylonian gods here. I'm panicking. Yeah. One of them, Nergal. Well, sure. I don't really know if anyone actually worshiped Nergal, but he was definitely a god in the pantheons over there. But I don't get it. We don't celebrate this way. We don't include everyone. Some of these are just for the rich people. Some of these are just for the common people. You're having everyone come together, even me, who knows nothing about your God. You're including the fatherless, the orphan, the widow. Like everyone, no one cares about them. Why do you care about them? Oh, it's because God cares about them. And God cares about me. So maybe I need to be thinking about that. And yeah, the Jewish religion as a whole wasn't entirely evangelistic, but we're going to see over time plenty of people convert to worshiping God and following the law. We've got Naaman in 2 Kings. We've got all the Greek converts that we see in the days of the Gospels who have no Jewish ancestry in their blood. And yet they see the good things of God and they say, before John the Baptist shows up on the scene, before Jesus shows up on the scene, they go, there's something to this. That's different than everything else in my life. I'm going to worship that God alone. And God knew exactly what he was doing here. If they are following these things correctly, other people are going to see his light and say, I'm in the wrong. I need to change. Let me follow this God alone. Let me get rid of these idols in my house. Let me get rid of what's going on in my life and turn it to him instead. And because they're doing that, the Jewish people will do it. It's supposed to be a cycle, a never-ending cycle of celebration, of good times, of God has given us such an abundance. I can give all this stuff away and I still have plenty of things to make money from. And we can celebrate together as a people, as a city, as a nation, until these just become holidays. Until these just become, I got nothing better to do on Saturday night or whatever. It's going to be fasting, I guess, because the law says to do it sometimes, whatever. But no, this is a time of celebration, a time of going, this is why we do what we do. God has gifted us in abundance, despite who I am, despite all the sacrifices I had to make this year because I screwed up, because I practiced adultery, because I cheated on someone in a deal, or what have you. Like, oh, this is what it's all about. Let me go out and celebrate. We'll go next to verses 18 through 22. You shall appoint judges and officers in all your towns that the Lord your God is giving you, according to your tribes, and they shall judge the people with righteous judgment. You shall not pervert justice. You shall not show partiality, and you shall not accept a bribe, for a bribe blinds the eyes of the wise and subverts the cause of the righteous. Justice, and only justice, you shall follow, that you may live and inherit the land that the Lord your God is giving you. You shall not plant any tree as an Asherah beside the altar of the Lord your God that you shall make, and you shall not set up a pillar, which the Lord your God hates. Whenever we do get to the prophets forever from now, I want you to remember verses like these. Because sometimes it feels like it's every other word at their mouth is, your judges are being bribed. Your judges are unrighteous. Your judges do not seek justice. They know nothing of God. Because they didn't listen to the law. Because they didn't listen to these very simple things. Is look, find righteous people to do that job. People who are not going to take a bribe. People who are not going to be partial. One man is rich, one man is poor. One man is poor, one man is rich. And they feel sympathy for the poor man, even though the rich man was the one who was wrong. Or they like the rich man more because they've had time with him, but he's the one who abused the poor man. You need someone who can be as impartial as possible with human judgment. And humans are flawed. Humans are screwed up, but it can be done. It can be done in the justice system for righteousness to be delivered, for true justice to be delivered. So keep your minds right. Appoint the people who are going to do the job and not going to take away from that job because someone gave them a little extra, or they gave them an extra fattened cow that they could even say it's a sacrifice to God. Look at how holy I am. No, the true reason was to pervert justice and get what you wanted instead. And God despises that. He's going to rally against it time and time again in the prophets, going, you idiots, you're perverting my justice. You're making sure the widow and the orphan are not being taken care of. You're not giving justice to them. The poor, you're forgetting. The sojourner in the land, you're killing them. Because you're upholding things for Israelites and not just everyone else. And sometimes only the rich Israelites, or sometimes only because he's your buddy. That's not how the law is supposed to work. That's not how perfect justice is supposed to work. They're supposed to know this law through and through and then say, you did this wrong. You need to make this sacrifice to God. You did this wrong. You need to pay him back for what you did. And do so without being affected by the things of this world. And as someone who's not going into law school or anything like that, Joshua would be a better person to go to there. Joshua Knoll. He studied far more than I. I know he sees how broken that system is. I don't even have to talk to him about that. But that doesn't mean we stop seeking it. That doesn't mean we stop demanding perfection from imperfect people. I mean, why do we go up to church on Sunday? Because we're perfect? No, because we're imperfect people who need to be fixed, who need to be working on ourselves, who need to be going towards a perfect God and holy God. And the same thing is true of the legal system. Our legal system, frankly, at times can suck. Does not always deliver justice as it should, does not look after the widow, the orphan, the fatherless, the sojourner in the land. Regardless of who that person is, they accept bribes. Or they look after the rich man and not the poor man. Or they look after someone who, with laws that have nothing to do with true justice, but have everything to do with people's popular perceptions about how things are supposed to be today. What's the hot coolness of being, thinking that you're being socially just, but you're actually not, because you're following trend versus actual moral law, actual truth. But that also doesn't mean we give up on the justice system simply because it is corrupt. Because every single human institution ever made, every single one, the courts, political parties, nonprofits, churches, every single one is going to be corrupted by the very fact that human beings are involved and human beings are imperfect and flawed. And this is exactly why no one will ever accuse me of being a humanist. And I am very grateful for that, because I see humans for who we really are. We suck. But if that's where I stay, I'm part of the problem, because all I'm doing is complaining. And you know me, I love to complain. It's like my superpower at times. It's almost like you can joke about it being a fake spiritual gift. But if all I'm doing is complaining, yeah, it's right to say it's wrong that we shouldn't be doing this. That's a good complaint. But if all I'm doing is complaining and I'm not doing something to fix the problem, or praying for God to do something to fix the problem, then what good am I? I'm just part of the problem. All I did was make people angry, and not even righteously so. So when you think, how can we be involved? How can we hold people accountable when we're looking for who we're picking, for who we're voting for, senators, presidential candidates, so on and so forth, voting for school board or something like that? Like, who are we voting for? Is it someone who's actually going to be protecting the interests of our country, of our citizens, regardless of where we are in the world? Is it someone who's going to be protecting the laws of the land? Or is it someone who's going to be looking out for self? And chances are, I hate to be cynical about this, most of the people that are on your ballot, they're going to be looking out for self, saying they're looking out for you. It's just exactly what we deserve, essentially. Once again, I don't like being cynical about this. I don't like even being right about this. I wish I were wrong. I wish more people out there who was seeking public office or seeking to become justices of the peace or what have you were actually looking out for others more than themselves. But I see the world as it is. So be mindful of that when it's our turn at the ballot, whenever that next time comes up. Do our research. See, what decisions have they made in the past? Who were they benefiting? Were they doing it because it was a law? Or doing it because a lobbyist came in and said, hey, you should really consider this. Oh, also, here's some money. It has nothing to do with what we're talking about. But here you go. Think about that. If we want true justice to be delivered in the land, it has to follow God's moral law, and it has to be done correctly. It has to be done well by people who are trustworthy. So find those people, prompt them up, call them out when they make a judgment. Not to be like, oh, this person called me out as a good guy. Maybe I give them something else. No, do it because it's right. Do it because it's just, because it is loving for this to have happened that way. And that's how you get your court systems to be better. That's how you get right and proper judgments to be made, is when people are called out for doing right. And they're voted in because they're going to do right. From the lowest judge in the world, all the way to Supreme Court, all the way to the presidency, the Senate, Congress, all of those. If we put the right people there, most of the time they're going to do right. And I say most because they're still human. They're going to screw up. They're going to take the wrong deal. They're going to, do something wrong. They're going to compromise in ways they should never compromise. But just because we can just cynically say they're going to screw up doesn't mean we give up on them. It means we call them out, and then it means we ask them, we then pray for them to do better. And if they don't, we remove support. It's as simple as that. You have my support if you do your job. You don't have my support if you're unrepentant. It's supposed to be rather simple. But we complicate things because we see things too far as too gray at times. No, there's a black and white in certain situations in this life. There are absolutes. Follow those absolutes if we want law and justice to be delivered well. If we don't want false laws that fake up people who have no business being protected by the law. We need to start somewhere. But also in this part, we get the parts that we'll carry on into chapter 17 of how to worship incorrectly and correctly. And we start incorrectly here. And it just goes with what happens earlier on. Like, hey, all those idols, get rid of them. When you're in the land, destroy them. So that means when you get into the land, you then don't get to make idols for yourself. So knowing you as I do and knowing exactly what you idiots are going to do, I'm going to put it in the law so that when it happens later on, you can't just say, well, God never said I couldn't do that. Say, no, you're going to be willfully ignorant if you say that. And we'll go from there today to chapter 17, this time verses 1 through 7. You shall not sacrifice to the Lord your God an ox or a sheep in which is a blemish, any defect whatever, for that is an abomination to the Lord your God. If there is found among you with any of your towns that the Lord your God is giving you, a man or woman who does what is evil in the sight of the Lord your God, in transgressing his covenant, and has gone and served other gods and worshipped them, or the sun and the moon, or any of the hosts of heaven, which I have forbidden, and it is told you and you hear of it, then you shall inquire diligently, and if it is true and certain that such an abomination has been done in Israel, then you shall bring out to your gates that man or woman who has done this evil thing, and you shall stone that man or woman to death with stones, on the evidence of 2 witnesses or of 3 witnesses. The one who is to die shall be put to death. A person shall not be put to death on the evidence of 1 witness. The hand of the witnesses shall be first against him to put him to death, and afterward the hand of all the people. So you shall purge the evil from your midst. Now I promise you some typology. Verse 1, completely ridden with typology. If you don't see it, that's on you. Jesus Christ is our perfect and holy sacrifice without blemish. Why? Because it's the only sacrifice worth having that can completely and utterly cover our sins. And not only cover our sins, but forgive us of our sins. The far more important part of that equation, covering is what the animal sacrifices could do. Jesus Christ covers our sins, but it also removes them completely if we accept him. So all over the sacrificial system, if you're not seeing Jesus in that part, you're not doing your due diligence. You're not looking things up like you should. You haven't read the book of Hebrews, which pretty much is a whole section there, plenty of chapters worth of Jesus, by the way, is the sacrifices in the sacrificial system. I can't put it to you more bluntly. This is a sign of what is to come. So look at this. God could have just said, I accept any old ox or sheep. You can give me the worst of the worst. I mean, the point is you're getting an effort into it, right? And I know. The point is you, if you are a Jewish person at this time in history, are giving up some of the best because you have done some of the worst of the worst. In order for your sins to be covered, not taken away, covered under the sacrificial system, you had to give an ox or a sheep without a blemish or any defect. Because why? Well, there's that fancy word there, abomination. And if I had actually had the time to write down notes, I would have looked up the Hebrew word because it's used multiple times over. If they're translating the same one I'm thinking they are. I covered a little bit of that in Leviticus. These things are an abomination against God. Every sin is an abomination against God. But ones like this are specifically called out as abominations against God because they are antithetical to who he is and what he desires from us. Go back Homosexuality, abomination. Bestiality, abomination. Not worshiping God correctly, abomination. Why? Because you're not having the sex that God wants you to have under the right conditions. Because you're not loving your partner like you should. There's no way in either of those relationships mentioned that you can do that correctly. Why does God bring up an abomination here? And why does he bring it up as an abomination for them to serve other gods? Because it's evil. It is evil to do the exact opposite of what God tells you to do. So if he says, give me one without blemish, and you give him one with blemish, you do not love him. So he will not accept it. But even more so, it is an abomination because, once again, who is our perfect sacrifice? Jesus Christ, the firstborn, the only begotten Son of God, the only perfect one able to actually undergo this process and have it actually work, have us not only cover sin, but remove them completely for all those who say his name and proclaim it as their own. And instead of themselves, instead of whatever agendas that they have, instead of adding him to the list of pantheon of gods. No. By denying what God said here, the Jewish people who did such a thing were denying his own son's sacrifice. And that is an abomination to God. All these things are antithetical to him. He cannot have you bring a blemished animal for sacrifice when he is giving the best of the best to save us from ourselves. And that is why also we see here, when other people are worshiping other gods, they are practicing an abomination. They are doing something that is so utterly evil in God's eyes. It is worthy of death. Because not only are they bringing themselves into sin, they are bringing others into sin if they choose to follow after them. Because those idols can bring them none of this that God gives. They can't love the people who worship them back. Only God can do that. Only God can save them from who they are. So, based on the witnesses and testimonies, the testimonies of two or more witnesses, that person is put to death. And those witnesses have to be personally involved as the first ones to throw the stones. Why? Because it takes an especially evil person to gather up enough people to make false accusations against someone, and then to also be the first person to murder that person. It takes someone as well who is truly righteous and truly loves his people to not only call that person out for their sin, but to have someone else who can attest to the truth of what they're saying, and then take the first stone and throw it. Because they care about the people that much. Their devotion to God is that great that they are willing to do something that otherwise we would never do and take the life of someone else who is that much of a threat, who is that much of a cancerous growth that you cannot abide their presence, because if you allow them to live, it will infect other people and it will cause destruction in the land. So they had to be diligent, they had to be shrewd, and they had to be wise. That's why they had to make sure those witnesses were reliable witnesses, that they weren't doing it for the sake of an agenda or perverting justice, that these were trustworthy people who were speaking truth into the world, and therefore when there was their time up to the bat, as it were, they could throw the first stone and not be guilty of murder, and not be guilty of leading others into murder. You don't have to like that, but that was part of the law. Be gracious that God doesn't demand the same of us right now, even though he would be righteous to do so. Certainly would have saved us a lot of terrible heresies over the years. But remember the mercies of God, and that he allows these evil men and women to live for a time, to give them time to repent, and to give the people that they lead astray time to repent, just as he has given us all time to repent. If you're his, guess what? He could have killed us all right before we gave ourselves to him, and he would have been perfectly righteous to do so. But he gave us enough time to get to where we needed to be. And that's something we need to praise his name for. Next up, 8 through 13. If any case arises requiring a decision between one kind of homicide and another, one kind of legal right and another, or one kind of assault and another, any case within your towns that is too difficult for you, then you shall arise and go up to the place that the Lord your God will choose. You shall come to the Levitical priest and to the judge who was in office in those days. You shall consult them, and they shall declare to you the decision. Then you shall do according to what they declare to you from that place that the Lord will choose. You shall be careful to do according to all that they direct you. According to the instructions that they give you, and according to the decision which they pronounce to you, you shall do. You shall not turn aside from the verdict that they declare to you, either to the right hand or to the left. The man who acts presumptuously by not obeying the priest who stands to the minister there before the Lord your God or the judge, that man shall die. So you shall purge the evil from Israel, and all the people shall hear and fear and not act presumptuously again. One of the huge buzzwords of our time is buzz phrases, I suppose, separation of church and state. 9 times out of 10, someone says that, they just heard what someone else said and say they don't want it and they don't understand what's going on. 1 out of 10, you'll actually meet someone who actually kind of understands, and you can have a productive conversation with them, and I highly disagree with them. I don't believe there should be separation between church and state to the extent that the church and the law of God does not affect the laws of the land. I do agree with a separation to the extent of, I don't think there should be a head of church on the head of a nation. I mean, ideally, your president and your members of Senate and Congress and so on and so forth, Supreme Court, would be Christian. That would be my ideal, but I can't enforce that. I would never make a law in the land where they had to be. That is where I am very, very tiny aligned with the idea of separation of church and state. But you know why I don't like the separation of church and state as the modern world understands it? Thomas Jefferson. Now, before I go any further, in recent years, it's become popular to hate on him because he owned slaves, but yet other people don't do the same to the other members of Congress who did that. And don't get me started on, goodness gracious, Alexander Hamilton and Burr and all that madness, because people have watched one play and they've decided that they know the entire history of what's going on there, not in regards to slavery, but in regards to who they were as people. And think that Alexander Hamilton was some god among men, some prophet who had only done good for the world. That's its own separate issue. Yeah. Also, don't get me wrong, I'm not downplaying Jefferson owning slaves while also proclaiming freedom and liberty for all men. That is absolutely hypocritical, amongst many other hypocritical things that the man did. But at that same time, this man is a father of the nation of America. I recognize his place in it. I'm very grateful for the hard work that he put in. If he had been captured by the British, he would have been murdered for a righteous cause, and that would have been a loss to the world. But the man himself, when it comes to his theology, is one of the biggest heretics this world has ever had. All I need you to prove this is just say Jefferson Bible. Why is that? Because Jefferson was what is known as a deist. Deists are people who believe that there is a God, believe that God created the world, and we say, okay, I'm with you. Oh, but also God abandoned the world after he was done. Say what? He did not believe in miracles. He did not believe in the supernatural. It's not that he didn't believe in the supernatural. He was a huge skeptic when it came to the supernatural, because he did believe that God supernaturally created the world. If I'm remembering his beliefs correctly. If I get any of these wrong, please correct me. It's been a while since I've studied them. Also, I would have had more notes if I'd actually done this, but here we are. And it is he who wasn't the one who originated the idea. I want to say that was John Locke, the philosopher there, who kind of came up with the idea. And no, not the John Locke from Lost, the guy who's named after John Locke is in Lost. Jefferson built off of Locke's ideas, some of them pretty good. That became the foundations of our nation for those of us in America, that other nations had then taken parts of in their own constitutions and so forth, that I do believe do a lot of good in the world. So I'm not here to say that Jefferson was some monster, that he was some person who was evil and we should have never listened to a single word he said. You see, because I believe in this cute little thing called nuance when it comes to looking at people of the past and not holding them to the standards of what's happening right now, because I also don't believe in chronological snobbery. Because I don't want to be a hypocrite. Because I want to be someone who takes people where they were in time and calling them out for evil that they do, but also calling them out for good that they do. Because people are multifaceted in many respects. You will very rarely find someone who's a complete and utter sociopath, has never done a single good thing in their lives. Yeah, it's still smaller g good because they're not following the ultimate capital G good that is in a capital G God. But even as far removed from a humanist as I am, I know people can do lowercase g good in the world. Anyone who says otherwise, run away from them. They're a misanthrope supreme. They probably want you to start murdering people because they don't like them. Or saying it's acceptable when those people die. Or saying that they can go to a funeral and say God hates fags or something like that, and then thinking that they're righteous, even though that's antithetical to who God is. Yet God hates the sin that they're doing. That doesn't mean he then goes and hates that person specifically because of that sin. No, he hates them in that regard because of what they're doing, their unrepentance. But he still loves them at that same time because God is also capable of love and hatred. And he being okay to do so because he is not a human being who can hate and be evil. God is alone a perfect God who can hate evil, but also love that person who does evil. So I'm all over the place once again. And even if I had notes, I probably would be all over the place. But Jefferson was one of the big proponents of the day of separation of church and state. Now, why am I talking about this? What does it have to do with what's happening here? Because the law that we have in this country, for the most part, is built off of God's moral law, even if no one wants to admit it. Don't steal. Don't murder. Don't commit perjury. Those are just some of the 10 commandments that are involved. And there's plenty of other things here too. Those laws do not exist in the way we have them now without Scripture, without the moral law of God. Yeah, as Paul says in Romans, as we covered forever ago, people know enough to have a conscience. People know enough to know that murder is wrong, that adultery is wrong. And they may even pass legislation that says so. But they don't do enough to actually commit to the idea. So while every human being in our heart of hearts knows these things are wrong, it's because God planted that there in us. And then he elaborates on it for us, first with the Jewish people, then the Christians, on what these laws mean, why he cares about them. So when we are making laws, inherently, there can be no separation of church and state because those laws do not come from us. They come from God. No human being came up with those laws without being motivated by their conscience, which comes from God, which from the general revelation that every person in the world has of it is wrong to murder. It is wrong to steal. It is wrong to lie. We all know that, and we choose not to do them at times. We choose not to listen to the law. So anyone who says separation of church and state, and that's their blanket statement, they're an idiot. Anyone who says separation of church and state and they're a little more nuanced about it, we can have that conversation because there are some people out there who are going to push back against me and say the church should never be involved, and they're going to have a bit more of an effort in their argument. I can talk with them all day long. I still think they're wrong, but at least they're actually thinking about it versus, well, my civics class said it one time, and therefore that's what I think should be. And that's what I'm challenging you. Just because, number one, even if the Bible just says something, how many times have I told you to test it out? How many times have I said, don't just trust me because I said it? I don't want sheep. Yeah, the church is a flock. Blah, blah, blah. That's meant to be imagery. It's not meant to be literal. Don't be sheep, and that you blindly accept whatever is told to you from the pulpit. That you blindly hear what I say and say, well, Christian's pretty smart. He must also be right. I do think I'm right, but I want you to challenge me to think for yourself and say, well, okay, I agree up to this point. And I think, well, maybe we shouldn't make a law based around adultery or what have you. You know what? We can have that argument. I'm fine with that. And once again, this is why I also said at the very beginning, I still very tiny agree with the idea behind some of the separation between church and state. But what I despise are people who blindly say it without understanding what it means and thinking it means the church can't be involved at all in the government of the whatever country that you're in. Because that's not even what Thomas Jefferson meant. If I'm remembering correctly, that church could have no involvement. Maybe he did, and I'm forgetting some things. It's been a while since I studied that. But I'm fairly certain that's not what he meant. I think his idea was the church shouldn't have a lot. Because once again, he was still a deist. He had some faith in some of the ideas, the moral ideas of the Bible, which is why he can make some of the laws that he did. I just don't think he was a believer, number one. And number two, I don't think that he was for the idea of totally removing the church from the government itself. And once again, if I'm wrong on any of this, please let me know. I would have done more research for this, but I was focusing more on graduation. Also, I'm also focusing on, goodness gracious, overseeing, ministering, what's the word I'm looking for here? Presiding over the first marriage that I have been asked to, preach over. And that's a lot of work. So cut me a little slack there, please. So look at this right here in the text. I went on that rant about church and state because of this, because it is what is exactly happening here. Yes, the Jewish people had a very different relationship with God than we do in certain respects, but the principles that are here are things we need to learn from. Why can the judges make the right calls? Because they're listening to the moral law. They're listening to God saying, this is right, this is wrong. And so this is why when they do call for people to die, that they can do so without being held culpable for murdering someone because they did what was true. And we're going to finish off today with verses 14 through 20. When you come to the land that the Lord your God is giving you, and you possess it and dwell in it, and then say, I will set a king over me like all the nations that are around me. You may indeed set a king over you, whom the Lord your God will choose, one from among your brothers. You shall set as king over you. You may not put a foreigner over you who is not your brother. Only he must not acquire many horses for himself or cause the people to return to Egypt in order to acquire many horses, since the Lord has said to you, you shall never return that way again. And he shall not acquire many wives for himself, lest his heart turn away. Nor shall he acquire for himself excessive silver and gold. And when he sits on the throne of his kingdom, he shall write for himself in a book a copy of the law approved by the Levitical priests. And it shall be with him, and he shall read in it all the days of his life, that he may learn to fear the Lord his God by keeping all the words of his law, of this law, and his statutes, and doing them, that his heart may not be lifted above his brothers, and that he may not turn aside from the commandment, either to the right hand or to the left, so that he may continue long in his kingdom, he and his children in Israel. Wings. Are they good? Kinda. But I prefer monarchy over democracy. Some days I flip-flop. Ultimately, I'd say democracy is superior, as flawed as a system as it is. But God, who, by the way, did not want this to happen, and yet still made plans knowing it would happen, there's a difference between the two, gives them a law to make a king over Israel because he knows it's going to happen. And he knows his people aren't going to like the system that he has, where it's a theocracy, where there's not, essentially the high priest is the head of everyone, but the centralized government isn't the same as what would be under a monarchy or anything. It's kind of anarchic in some regards, not totally, but there are aspects of it within there. A theocratic anarchy in some respects. I can't remember other terms people have used. Once again, I would have looked that up if I had more time, but here we are. So knowing his people and their hardness of heart, once again, for why he provides things in the law for like divorce and what we just discussed before, God gives them a law for their hardness of heart of choosing someone else over him to be their king. The humility involved with that, I can't even fathom. Like, you jokers, you idiots, think I'm not good for you? You want a flawed human being who's going to die and is worthy of being taken straight to hell for their sins unless they're following me? You want them to rule over you? Forget you. But that's not what God does. God is far more merciful and loving than I, and I'm working on it. And he says, okay, if you jokers want a king, I'll give you a king. But there are laws to it. And there are laws that apply to him. And the spirit of that law should apply to you too. We'll get to that. So, no foreigner. It has to be one of your own brothers. Perfect sense. Why? Because chances are that foreigner does not follow God, because the Jewish people alone are God's people. There are people like the Egyptians who came in, like the Arameans who will come in, like the Greeks who will come in, but they do not get the right to rule over the land because they are not God's people, as in the race. They're God's people as that they came to him, chose him, and bowed down to him alone, but they are not his people, as in he made them to be his people. So that makes perfect sense. He must not acquire many horses for himself, or return to Egypt to acquire more horses. What does that mean? Well, horses were a sign of immense wealth. If you had horses, you had money. And the more horses you had, the more money you had. Also, horses would be used for warfare. And the Israelites primarily were not supposed to be using chariots. Now, later on they would, and God allowed them to do so. But as you'll see, we do eventually get into Joshua after we get into Matthew. As well, certain parts of the law, if I remember correctly, are saying, hey, you're supposed to hamstring those horses or kill them. Why? Because those horses would be used for chariots. Those horses would be used naturally as a part of war, were a great invention that you had a lot of power over someone. If you were riding straight through them, yeah, they have their spears and their pikes or whatever, but a horse, or horses, can run over people, can get into people and cause them to fall into despair and get out of formation. And you'd have people on that chariot with you who could use spears or bows and arrows or swords to kill people from the high ground. You would have the superior high ground. It'd be perfect for Obi-Wan. So people would put more faith in them for war than they would put in their faith in God. So God was trying to say, don't do this. It's a sign of wealth. Also, who has horses? You're probably going to get them from Egypt. Who you're not supposed to be like? Egypt. So don't do these things. And yet, every single one of these laws is going to be broken by the people of Israel. And it's going to be their own fault. Next up, he shall not acquire many wives for himself, lest his heart turn away. And we'll stay there for right now. Solomon is the easy punching bag here. 700 wives, 300 concubines. They lead him into worshiping other gods, even though he's the wisest man on earth. Well, the wisest man on earth is still a man, capable of great sin. And as a result of that, of him looking after these wives instead of looking after God, he leads himself into sin, leads Israel into sin, and it causes eventually the split between the two kingdoms. That if he had not done this, if he had followed the law and not his libido and not political alliances, we wouldn't be in this problem. Now, where did he learn that from? His daddy. David did the exact same thing to a smaller scale, mind you. But Solomon saw David had all these wives that he was not faithful to. And even Solomon's own mother, Bathsheba, was one of those women that David was not faithful to, and that he had an illicit affair with her. First child dies. Solomon is able to live because of God's providence. And God allows Solomon to become king through that relationship, even though it was born out of evil. God allowed good to come from it. So Solomon learns from daddy and goes, well, if he can do it, I can do it. Even though, by the way, in the law, which the priests around them should have been speaking to them and which they should have known about, this was against the law. You may also notice this is the first time in the law polygamy is mentioned. There are different reasons why scholars think this is. Some think that polygamy was okay because, of low birth rates, not low birth rates, of high fatality rates. That could happen without access to medicine, without access to proper child care, and hard pregnancies, and cause children to not live because they lived in a harsher time than you and I do. We are in a very great age where infant fatalities are an all-time low. In the modern world, there's still plenty of places in the world where there is still help that is needed to modernize and give them medicine and make sure that they're cared for because disease is more rampant. But they don't have what we have. So scholars think that maybe God allowed it because the more wives you had, the more likelihood you would have children, didn't carry on your name. I disagree with that because I see every single time polygamy is brought up in the Bible, something bad happens. God still uses it for his purposes, like he did with Jacob and Leah and Rachel and their two concubines, Bilhah and Zilpah, if I remember correctly. He brings the entire nation of Israel from that, but that's not his ideal. Go back to the very beginning. What is it? It is a man shall leave his parents behind to be with his wife, singular. It has always been the moral law that a man shall only be with one wife. And the end result isn't pretty, because the end result brings us to what happens multiple times. There's succession crises in Israel. There are civil wars that happen because there are, multiple children of the same parent. That cause problems along the way. There are bad alliances that are formed because he has one wife, then he marries another wife, and things go down. If that didn't happen, if you stick to the one wife, things would have been much better for the people. And so God explicitly demands that the king, who, by the way, should be the highest person on the totem pole, who is not the high priest or God, not to do it. So what does that say to the common man? If the king can't do it, I can't do it either. But once again, despite the hardness of their hearts, God still allowed good things to happen. He allows Hannah not only have Samuel, but to have more children, even though she is the second wife of Elkanah, if I remember correctly. Like, God allows Solomon to come, even though David has multiple sons who aren't up to the task of being king. God uses them. From that, we get the line of Jesus. That happens because of the result of polygamy. That does not mean God condones it. It means that God uses us despite ourselves for his purposes and his glory. So if there's anyone out there that's telling you God said polygamy is fine, you're not reading the same book I am. And if you're saying that God thinks that you can just acquire wealth for yourself and that's all dandy and that's the only thing you need to care about in life, we're also not reading the same book. Because in the second part of 17, it says, you shall not acquire for himself excessive silver and gold. That does not mean God says that wealth is bad. We've been over that. What he means is for the king, he should not acquire excessive. What is excessive? More than you need. So that means for our favorite billionaires and trillionaires out there in the world, when they go excessive, they are sinning. When the king does it, he is sinning because that wealth has been gifted by God, not just for them, not just for you and I. If we have an abundance and we misuse it, we are to blame. I'm not saying this is not your, hey, give it to the church. It could be something else. It could be that a widow or fatherless person or sojourner in the land that we were just talking about. It could be a nonprofit that really does their job, is always tight around that budget, making sure none of that money is misappropriated. It could be that that person is struggling with medical bills or what have you. If you have the money and you're not using it excessively, use it wisely. So if it's expected of the king, it's expected of me. So if I ever somehow make a lot of money, I better use that money wisely. We've talked before. I made a promise if I ever get one lump sum, a certain amount of money, I need to use that money wisely because I made a promise. And a lot of that money is not going to me. And then to the final part here. He has to have the law written for himself again. They've got copies already. They need to make more copies. Why? Because the king needs one to himself. Why? Because he's going to be in charge of the entire nation. And if he doesn't know the law either, the people are screwed. So together they need to work. Both he, the priest, high priest, working alongside God to bring God's will into the world. Even though God did not want a king, God still used the people's will to have a king for his good and our good. And from that, we get our King, Jesus, who's the only king that we will ever need in this world and in the next. And with that, we're done for today. Thank you all for what you do. Please, if you get a chance, leave a 5-star review in your podcasting platform of choice. Help us with the ratings there to find more people. Please feel free to share the show with other people, someone you think might be interested in it. If you're interested in my own fiction writing, you can find my works at starvingwritersguild.com or on Amazon by searching for the name MC Ashley. If you're all interested in some further solid studies into the Bible and its teachings, then check out the other members of the Annisal Ministries Podcasting Network. You can contact me at letnothingmoviepodcast@gmail.com. I'd like to extend a special thank you to Joshua Knoll for the editing that it does and for the music he adds to the podcast. And with all that in mind, God bless you in accordance to his will, not mine. And allow me one more time to remind you, let nothing move you.